Welcome to On My Couch. So my name's Damien. I've already got Sue laughing, so that's off to a good start. So I'm the founder of OMC Group, and what we do, work with individuals, teams and organisations and fundamentally help people work better together. What do we do with leadership development, team effectiveness, culture, those types of programs, but always with the outcome around how do we help people work better together. Sue, maybe rather than me introduce you, just give us a bit of your background, your highlights. Who are you? What have you done? And what do you do now?
Thanks, Damien. So my career spanned 30 years in retail property, and now I do what I call a sort of a hybrid career. I do a bit of consulting on a couple of boards, but look, I like working with interesting and different people, and that's what's attracted me, obviously, to join you today, and in particular, learn about neuroscience and well-being.
Yeah, terrific. Which is a nice segue. Cynthia, I'll introduce you in a minute, and thank you so much for making time and joining us. And I'll do some highlights from the CV and ask you to talk about your why in a minute. But I mean, we're all the show is called On My Couch, and that's really a metaphor for the style of conversation. We want to have a conversation, as Sue talked about. We like meeting interesting people and people that no pressure, Cynthia, people that are smarter than us, yeah. So what we really wanted to do is have that conversation and get us thinking about people and working together, and hopefully it's an opportunity for us to apply it within our work, or if not, just have an interesting chat and learn some more. So Cynthia, a facilitator, a coach, mentor, speaker, and author, which is sensational. So you also lead and run your own consulting business. I was fascinated in terms of some of your previous roles as a program manager, project leader with Department of Primary Industries, Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources and Environment. And
Damien, all the same department, but just
really?
all those name changes.
Wow.
That's sensational. Yes, okay. I was tempted to make a reference to a show which is on ABC TV, but I won't, though, because that wouldn't be appropriate right now. So, but also, I mean, the name changes are interesting, but the programs, their Wine and Summer Fruit, National Wine Industry Leadership Project, the Grape Check program, which I think that sounds sensational, and the Plant Biosecurity Communication and Awareness. So, I mean, maybe I'll be quiet and hand over to you and maybe just talk a little bit more about yourself and what are you doing now and why.
Yeah, thank you, Damien. And so it's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me, and also hi to everyone out there, and thank you for tuning in today. I just really believe that keeping open to new information and always continually learning is just so important. It really is one of my core values, and there is nothing more than I love than to listen to other people and learn. And that's one of the reasons I love having my own business and developing programs for teams and leaders that help to energize them, help to focus them, help them to reduce the overwhelm, and help them hopefully lift to new levels. So that's what I'm all about. And so in my own practice, in keeping up to date with all the new information that can support leaders and teams to do that, I'm just continually learning all the time, which is why I just love running my own practice. As you mentioned, Damien, yes, I did have a 17-year career as a public servant, and I felt like my soul had died.
Right.
In the end, to be brutally frank. So I was really playing small. I was trying to fit into a box. I couldn't show my strengths, the things that I loved doing and was passionate about. There were changes in the department at that time, and I'm a facilitator. I love being with people, and that they didn't want us to do that work directly anymore. So it was scary, but I've also realized that all the best things I've done in life have been when I was terrified. Mm-hmm. So I just, for the first time in my life, backed myself and thought, you know what, I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. And I left the department. And the amazing thing was that when I closed a door and made a decision to back myself, all these other doors just magically appeared in front of me that were these amazing opportunities to pursue my love of developing people and leaders. And I think because I had a real struggle in the department where I at times, I didn't value myself. I think that's why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I think everyone is awesome and everyone has strengths. And so I want to help people and organisations be able to value themselves and value their people.
Cynthia, Damien mentioned that you've written a book, Cultivate How Neuroscience and Wellbeing Support Rural Leaders to Thrive. So with that fantastic introduction, how did you end up from, starting out on your own? Thank you. Good. Great. Look for it in all the bookshops.
Yep.
And online, I'm guessing. So how did your transition from being in a government career, jumping out on your own to writing a book? Talk to about how that all came about, and what's the story behind the book?
Yeah, so I'm an agricultural scientist, and I was never never great at all the technical stuff. That didn't interest me. It was always the people side of things. And also, I guess, just thinking about change and how people change. And so because I'm a scientist, though, it just naturally comes to me that I love people. Sorry, not because I'm a scientist, but I love people. However, the scientist in me also likes evidence. And so a lot of the things that we used to do as facilitators, which were having the icebreakers in the meeting and, helping people talk in small groups, in the organisation I worked with, there were a lot of hard asses, excuse me for swearing, but, they were full-on scientists, like just that's all fluffy. That's all, that's just feel-good stuff. It's not really important. But we as facilitators knew it was. And neuroscience came along, and that gave us a way of actually legitimizing and validating why those things work. And why those things work is because, from a neuroscience perspective, they make our brains feel safe. So we're either in our amygdala, the threat part of our brain, or when we're feeling safe, we're in the higher functioning part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And so if as leaders and as organisations, we're able to create brain-friendly environments where people feel safe and valued and contributing their strengths, they're able to think and operate at their best. Whereas when they're in the threat part of their brain, they actually can't think properly, and we can't make good decisions when we're in threat mode. And in fact, we can't even really hear what other people are saying. And so for me, all of those things that I've done as a facilitator I've realized are about psychological safety and about making people feel safe. And so the new science that has come about has really enabled me as a thought leader to take my content to a new level, because I can explain the people that love people feeling good, the stuff that I do resonates with them anyway. But what I can say to people for whom outcomes are really important is that I can say, if you treat your people well, you're not doing it just to feel good. You're actually doing it because you'll get better outcomes and the business will perform better.
That must make a big influence, that being able to have a fact-based anchor, because obviously corporates are always looking for a return and well, why should I do this? But I think that the fact that you've got a fact-based must make it a much easier discussion, as you say, to have with scientists. But I also noticed the book is support rural leaders. Why specifically rural leaders? Does it apply to people, like me, that is living in, the suburbs of Sydney?
Absolutely. Look, rural leaders I do work a lot with rural communities and rural leaders. And I thought, when I was doing this book, I thought, I don't think anyone's written a book specifically for rural leaders. And I would like to explore some of their issues, which I do in the first chapter. And then the rest of the book is actually open for anyone. So it really is. So I'm actually going to relaunch it and take the word rural out and just keep it for leaders.
Okay.
Because I've had a lot of people say to me, but I've read this book, and someone actually yesterday, a client, they're insurance underwriters in Melbourne, and the CEO wanted me to give a copy of the book to everyone in the leadership team. And she said that I've got to be honest, the rural thing, it just put me off a bit, but the book's really good. And so everyone in the team needs to have a copy. So some of the issues though that I noticed for rural leaders that were just a little bit different to perhaps someone who's in an urban area is that you're really visible when you're in a rural community. And so when you're going down the street to do your shopping, you're seeing your workmates all the time. They're in your cricket club, they're in your church, they're in your school. So there's a couple of things with that. You can't really have a different persona in your workplace than in your home life because everyone's seeing you all the time. Whereas I think sometimes for urban leaders, I've had leaders who've worked in Melbourne, and they haven't been the nicest people at work. They've been pretty tough and hard, but then apparently when they go home, they're absolute pussycats and sweethearts. So they've got different identities at work to what they've got at home. And I don't think rural leaders can do that. The other thing, there's something about being more visible with your accountability, that if you've made a hard decision at work, then you've got to see that person and that person's friends and that down this, like I said, down the street. So you're facing the impact of your decisions all the time. You can't escape them like I think you can. You can be a bit more anonymous in an urban area. So that puts a whole lot of extra pressure, I reckon, on unless you're like super famous, like a super famous leader, like Scott Morrison. He wouldn't be able to hide wherever he goes, or whoever. Elbow. The other thing that I think is really impactful on rural leaders is that they're so in the environment. So we've had fires, we've had floods, and I know city people have had those things as well. But in a rural community, you're living in it. There's no escape from your environment. And so if there's been something like a fire or a flood, all your workers, they've been affected by that fire and flood. And so they're turning up to work, bringing all that with them. And you've had to deal with all of that as well. So you've got a whole workforce that's potentially got a whole lot of issues that are influenced by the natural environment that you then need to manage as a leader, which I also think, things like the fires, they've got ramifications of trauma for years. And that comes out in your teams.
Absolutely. I admire, we've got some family that are rural and in mid of New South Wales, and one word that we often use to describe them is resilient, because everything about what they do is almost at the mercy of somebody else. And they have to get uncomfortable. They get very comfortable with being constantly uncomfortable, and that must have a big impact in terms of where you say in terms of their brain, where they're sitting and how they're feeling, because they're just dealing with this constant, well, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow,
And the mental, all the stats say the mental health of people in rural areas is less than people in urban areas as well. So again, you're dealing with the fallout of that in your workplace and the people with whom you're working.
Which might be a nice sort of, segue. One of the things that, we talk about, Sue and I talk about with different, both in our work and also with people on our couch is around, leadership, and that conversation sort of weaves its way through. So what's your definition of leadership? How do you think about, leadership?
I think of leadership as being I've got a term of cultivating leadership. Okay. So my book is called Cultivate, and I think there's an element of being able to cultivate yourself and look after yourself. And there's an element of being what I call a cultivating leader, and then having an organization with a cultivated culture. And that's as opposed to high performance. Right. So I used to be all about high performance, and then I just realized, you know what, that's just relentless. That's a machine. That's not human. And cultivate to me says we go up and down. We've got peaks and troughs. Yes, we're thriving sometimes, but sometimes we're overwhelmed and sometimes we're stressed. And that's human, and that is totally okay. We shouldn't have to pretend that we're something we're not in workplaces and turn up wearing a mask thinking that we need to be thriving all the time, because that's exhausting. So and when I looked at high performance, it's things like there's words gassed up, high speed, high geared, pumped up, supercharged. Like no one can do that.
Cynthia, I think your screen's just flipping a little bit.
Oh, is it? Blast.
Yep.
I've had some camera issues, so
I could see two versions of Sue. Nothing wrong with that. There's very nice to see two versions of Sue. That's cool.
Am I back?
You're back. You're back live. Back live.
So the opposite of high performance was inferior, awful, low grade, lousy, mediocre, pathetic, rotten, trashy.
Right.
So if we're not high performing, we're not good enough. When I looked at cultivate, though, cultivate is bolster, cherish, develop, encourage, advance, enrich, improve, nourish, teach, better. So that's what I think a leader is. Someone who I want a leader who does that for me, who encourages me, who bolsters me. And I actually put a survey out to my network, and I asked them what they thought, who were the leaders they admired and the behaviours that they saw, and what were the behaviours they wanted to eliminate. And it was things like they accept feedback gracefully, they're imperfect, they provide support, they challenge people to be their best selves, they're authentic, they are inclusive, they're open to change, they trust their team. And the below the line behaviours, or the dinosaur behaviours they wanted to get rid of, were big ego, need to be right, self-interested, punish people for calling out poor behaviour, talk the talk but don't walk the walk, undermines confidence of others, blaming, shaming, putting others down, dominating, evading accountability, etc.
Yeah. Okay. And that's really interesting. I mean, and I think I know the answer to this question. I think I know what your answer is going to be. Is that something you think has changed over time? So is that something that's evolved? I mean, you talked about your career within the public service across multiple programs. You work with a lot of leaders. Is that? Do you think that's that approach around cherishing, has that become more important? Is that, and have leaders led that, or are leaders responding to that requirement?
I think that leaders are responding to that need from their people. So people don't want a transactional workplace anymore. They don't want to show up and get their money and go home in a privileged environment, I think. People they want to know that they're cared about. They want to know that they're going to be developed. They want to know that they're trusted. They want to know that they can be themselves in the workplace. And so, but I see people are promoted all the time because they're good at being on the tools. They're good, and it's really hard for them to let that go. But they haven't been promoted necessarily for being really good with emotional intelligence and with their people. And so I'm seeing they're still, like, I've been doing this work for 30 years, and every new group I speak to, this is like fresh. It's like, oh my goodness, I didn't know this before, above and below the line, about I can choose how I show up at work. I can make a decision to be more accountable. What's within my control? Oh, golly, if I look after my people, they'll perform better. Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought I had to whip them and, make them afraid. So I think there's still in some cultures like, I think it is a masculine kind of 1990s culture, I would say, and particularly I do a lot of work in rural. So there's still that does dominate and federal parliament. We just have to look at that to see that type of leadership. So I just really, but I don't think that's what people want. And I don't think that, and I think more and more people are being prepared to say, no, I don't want to be part of this.
So which is a segue, my final question on leadership then. So 2023, beginning of 2023, which is, we're transitioning into that first quarter. What's the, if you think about a key aspect of leadership, what should leaders be focusing on throughout 2023, do you think? Is it, if you had to narrow it down to one thing?
Emotional intelligence.
Right.
That is my number one thing at the moment, because we're so disrupted, and disruption. Look at AI, look what's happening there. Our society is on the brink of a massive, even more disruptive than COVID. Yeah. So people have again have to have the ability with emotional intelligence. It's about being able to manage and regulate yourself, as well as influence the mood of others and the state of others. And so it starts with us. We need the intelligence to be self-aware, and to be able to interrupt our default patterns, to create those brain-friendly environments, and to be able, as a leader, it's really important, if you're calm and able to influence others' state, that can really help them in times of stress and overwhelm like there are now. And one final thing is, with the new changes to that, which I know you've talked to Paige about, the changes in the OH&S legislation around psychosocial safety, and the fact that psychosocial safety is now going to be legislated just as physical safety. And one of those aspects is work is overload for work, and which I see happening all the time. That is going to require a very emotionally intelligent leader to be able to lead those conversations in workplaces to navigate the implementation of this new legislation.
Yep.
Just on that leadership piece, how then do you, what's the best way of communicating that with your team? Because a lot of times, leaders get held up to account for the, not only the performance, but as you said, the emotional and social well-being of the people that actually report to them. But if they're not, open and transparent as well, so how do you get that behavior mirrored to your team or the people that report to you?
So I again, it all comes back to people being self-aware. And there's a great stat from Tasha Urich that says 95% of us think we're self-aware, and only 10 to 15% of us actually are. And self-awareness is around, how aware am I of what's going on within me at any one time, and how aware am I of how I'm perceived and experienced by others? And so that's the whole emotional intelligence thing. And I've got a tool that I've been using as a coaching and group training tool called the Emotional Capital Report. And that is a really awesome tool. It's got 10 emotional intelligence competencies, and it's a tool for leaders. And it's some great conversations about, so as I said earlier, like, there are things within burnout that are organizational issues, but everybody has a choice on how they show up in the workplace. And I think a lot of us, and I was like it, I was so below the line in the department. I was so victim-y. I didn't have this language or these tools to help me understand that my behavior was below the line a lot. And it was because I was really disempowered, I was lost, and I was blaming. I was pointing the finger at everybody else. Now, thankfully, because of all the work that I've done, and that's the irony of our expertise, I've done so much work on myself, but it's like, I now know that I can choose how I show up and what sort of person do I want to be. I don't want to be the person that's bitching behind everybody's back and blaming. I want to be the person that, as I think I am now, which is, I've got all this opportunity. I've got so much opportunity to create stuff, to have great relationships, to do work that I love. And that's all come about through being self-aware and knowing now that I've got a choice of how I show up and how I can kind of almost interrupt and disrupt my own beliefs that are in my subconscious. Because and so it's sort of like, I reckon often, our brains run us through our old patterns and our old operating systems, and we're not even conscious a lot of the time of why we behave like we do, because it's all these old patterns. But if you do the work to really surface those beliefs, then you can actually stop those patterns and go, actually, I'm going to make a choice about how I behave here. And so I think we're all leaders. We're all leaders of our own lives. And that empowering people to know that they've got a choice and know that they can look at their situation totally different. When people know that they've got control, that's so much more empowering. So I reckon in a state that we're in at the moment with so much uncertainty, the more we can empower people to, again, the old circle of control, recognize what they've got control over, that then is going to lead to so many more empowered and accountable people.
Would that be your definition of thriving then?
Yeah, and I've got a little tagline of people being happy, healthy, and human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want. Again, like I said, I don't want people to be going to work wearing a mask and thinking that they've got to be not who they are, because it's soul destroying. So my definition of thriving is being happy, healthy, and human. But the outcome of that is that we're more energized, we're more focused, we're less overwhelmed, and we're able to do our best work.
Yeah.
I think the point that you make, that everyone is a leader, is a really good way of positioning that conversation, because ultimately people, as you say, look to somebody else and go, oh, well, it's their fault because of the way I'm behaving. Actually, it could well be, but you can actually change how you behave as well. So you're a leader of yourself.
Absolutely. And the other point that I'd like to make is that there's such a ripple effect to this stuff. Like, imagine if you're able to empower people in your team who have been really victim-y, and if they're empowered and they're like more positive, more energetic, know that they've got a choice, they go home to their families. That whole vibe goes with them. Same with their communities, same with our world as a whole. So I kind of want to change the world just one little person at a time, because the ripple effect is just so huge. Because I know what it's like when you feel really bad and you're dreading going to work and you're feeling like you're not using your strengths. It has such an impact on you. But then, because our emotions are so infectious, that spreads to the people you love. And so I know now that me being a much more self-expressed version of myself than what I used to be, that just has such a contagion effect to those people around me.
Yeah, well, we don't want to talk about contagion and love the word. Maybe we could have a positive contagion in this case. Yeah.
Influence.
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, Cynthia, you've clearly got a lot of experience and a lot of different rules. Different rules, different roles that you've done, right? And also one of the things I noticed that you've done a number of podcasts as well. So how many podcasts have you done?
Done 9.
9, fantastic. So, I mean, what have you, and you talked about right at the start, you talked about your love of learning, right? So what have you picked up from those podcasts that help you think about thriving and think about this, this aspect of leadership that you talk about, which, about cultivation? Yeah.
So, I think the thread, so I've interviewed a lot of leaders and the theme, it's cultivate. So the theme is that, everyone struggles, and it's the ability to be able to be vulnerable, to get the support that you need. It's how powerful it is for leaders to actually ask for help and to share their experiences of struggle. I interviewed one guy, Christian Parsons from Costa Group, actually, and he was talking about, he was so open, he had a breakdown at work. And he said it was because I was trying to be a leader that I didn't want to be, but I thought I had to be that type of leader to fit in.
Yep.
And he said, I had a breakdown. I was off work for 6 months.
Wow.
And when I came back, the organisation and I had to learn together that actually a return to work from burnout is not just a straight line, that it was up and down, and it was really hard for me to manage, and it was hard for the organisation to manage, but we had to navigate it together. So this whole, I think, being vulnerable, being and really the authenticity, just being a leader, the leader that you are, and you don't have to be anyone else. You just have to find you and do you the best that you can be, because that's the gift then that you're giving everybody else who you lead, is that they are enough and they can be them, and that's enough. And that's so powerful if they've got permission to be themselves.
So if you could go back in time, Michael J. Fox, and talk to yourself 20 years ago, right? What would you tell Cynthia of 20 years ago to do more of or to do less of, do you think? Is it about being authentic? Is that the key message, do you think? Or
so one thing I would say is don't be so hard on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I took a lot of, yes, I was totally below the line, but I also took on a lot of other people's stuff, I reckon, and I blamed myself for it. And I didn't need to do that. So take responsibility for what's yours, but also don't take too much responsibility. It's like we've got overdone strengths, and if you overdo them, they're not helpful to you. So I was totally overdoing, I was like, I'm to blame for all of this, all of the trouble that I get myself into. And if I go somewhere else, that's just going to follow me. So it's up to me. I'm the problem. But one day a line got crossed at work, and I actually realized, oh my goodness, it's not all me. It's actually the culture, and I don't fit. Yep. So, but I never was able to back myself until that line got crossed. And then I realized, do you know what? I am actually okay.
Yeah.
I am actually enough. I actually am awesome. And I've just got to find somewhere to work where I can be that person. And I was liberated. I'm free. I'm free to be myself every day. Yep. And that is it's just so wonderful. And then people come and work with me because they like my thing. There's going to be people on this podcast who probably switched off because I've got pink and there's pink, and they're not going to like me. Yep. They're not going to like me. And that is totally okay, because I'm not for them.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people I am for. They like this, they like me, and they like my values and what I stand for, and we're compatible. So I think a bit of Taylor Swift, if Tay-Tay had have been around, she's so wise, but shake it off and the haters are going to hate.
Yeah.
Like I was far too worried about what other people thought of me, but actually it doesn't matter. There's going to be someone that always doesn't like you, and you don't have to take that on.
Yeah.
So that would
you can control it too. We were talking earlier about sometimes you fall in love with the idea of working for a particular organization. There's something about it. There's the mystique, or there's the brand, or whatever it becomes an ambition, and then you actually get there and you find it's not like you thought it is. And I liked your point where you can say, and that's okay. It's nothing wrong with the organization. I just don't belong here. So I'm going to go and find somewhere else where I do belong. And I think that's a really brave and very mature adult perspective, because people then go, well, no, the organizer needs to change to fit to me. Well, actually, but yes, maybe the organization can change some, but the only person you're really accountable to is yourself ultimately.
So that is just such a wonderful insight, because I wasted so much time pointing the finger going, they should change. They should, why are they like this? They. And to take responsibility and go, you know what? No, yes, it is them. It is them, but that just means I don't fit. I'm a square peg in a round hole. So actually I should go somewhere else. And I reckon some of the leadership work I do and the coaching work I do, that is such an like you said, Sue, an empowering thing to realize actually I don't belong, and I've got agency to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Terrific. So, Cynthia, we could keep on going, but I mean, this is a really, really, really good, conversation. So, but I mean, I love the fact that you talked about your first book, and do you want to give that a plug? If people want to, how do they either learn more about your book, or listen to your 9 podcasts, or your soon to come 10th podcast? They want to learn more about Cynthia. How do they do that?
Yes, so they can go to my website, www.cynthiamahoney.com.au, and they can find, the podcasts, which will take them to the whatever platform they like, and my book. And I've got some wellbeing cards as well that are sort of wisdom from women about wellbeing, and they can buy my book there. So my next thing, which I was chatting with you about, Damien, Sue, earlier, is that I am going to write a new book. It will be quite different to this one, but it's sort of the thing of every client that I'm speaking to at the moment is just overwhelmed with meetings, back to back meetings. And so the meetings aren't run well. They're too long. There's too many people going to them, not the right people. They don't get the outcomes people want. And the feedback that I've got is I'm in so many meetings that I have to do my work at home, or my actual work on the weekends or after work, because I haven't got time. So I think that this thing of meetings is a bit of a symbol of our burnout culture. Mm-hmm. So there's something that I really want to do around the culture. Do people feel safe to say, no, I don't need to go to this meeting? Yep. The kind of standards around meetings, that it is okay to say no, and that we look at sort of how the architecture of our meetings, how people and leaders run meetings, because the research shows that most leaders don't run great meetings, but they think their meetings are really good. Mm-hmm. And then, as we've talked about before with self-agency, as a participant, again, rather than going, all these meetings are really crappy, actually thinking, how do you show up as a participant in meetings? How do you stay engaged? Like I was running a session and a guy said, well, actually, one of the things that I'm going to do is just right now in this session, I've got the tennis on in the background. So I'm going to actually go and switch it off so that I'm engaged. And I was like, that is awesome. Well done. For keeping yourself engaged. That's so great. So so I really want to get really practical about that area because it's such an area of need at the moment for people. Cool,
terrific. Cynthia, thank you so much. I mean, love chatting to you, love reconnecting with you, and I mean, this you talked about authenticity and being who you are, and that shone through. So that was a really interesting and engaging conversation. Certainly got me thinking about that self-advocacy, and and that how am I showing up? What's the impact that I'm having on people, and actually owning that stuff as opposed to blaming other people or attributing it to someone else. So thank you for that. Sue, what did Cynthia get you thinking about? Any insights?
I just thought that the single sentence "leadership is contagious" was a really aha moment, because you're right. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad; it's contagious. Yeah. And I think that's when you think about it like that, and how you can influence how you are and how you want to show up. Because we're all leaders. Doesn't matter what role in the organisation you have, we're all leaders. And I think that leadership is contagious was a big takeout for me.
Cynthia, any final words or top tips from you?
Yeah, so possibly one thing that I haven't touched on is actually the importance of having really positive people around you and surrounding yourself with awesome people. So I'm part of a business school that I'm a participant in, and what that has done for me, it has just changed my mindset about what is possible for me. Like there's things like writing a book. I would never have written a book had I not been in this school, but the expectation there is that you'll write a book. Yeah. So you kind of go, okay, I'm going to rise to that expectation. And there's people around, they share, they're so inspiring. And so it just breaks your own limiting self-beliefs. Yep. So my encouragement, particularly in tough times where people are overwhelmed, be with people who give you energy and who inspire you to be greater than what you think you can be, and just bust through all those self limits that we set ourselves. So your tribe is so important.
Cool. What a great way to end. So Cynthia, thank you so much for making time. Sue, thank you once again for joining us. There was a really great on my couch OMC group, as we mentioned. We focus on helping people work better together. If you want to learn more, omc-group.com.au. And Cynthia, Sue, thank you again. And Sue, look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. See ya.